if you would compare, you would see that there's some changes in the nominal also, which reflects the impact of the double deflation, which has broadly been positive. And finally, these are the new series annual estimates. If we look at 23-24, it is at 7.2%. 24-25, the first revised estimates are at 7.1%. And the second advanced estimates are at 7.6% compared to 7.4%, which is what we had mentioned in early January when we had released the first. You would see that in all the 3 years, last 3 years, the growth rate, real growth has been over 7%. And the nominal growth rate over the last 3 years is averaging above 9%. And that's very important because these are the numbers when we talk of achieving Viksit Bharat 2047. The numbers being talked about are between 7 to 8% real growth rates and between 9 to 10% of nominal growth rates. So I'll stop here and over to you, Mr. Ojan.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for a very informative presentation. Now I request Chief Economic Advisor, Dr. V. Anantha Nageswaram, sir, to address the media.
Is there a PPT coming? Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Saurabh Garg. Respected friends from the media, colleagues, thank you very much. And Dr. Saurabh Garg has shared with you the methodological changes, the revisions, and how the performance of the economy has been in the last 3 years, plus the first 3 quarters of the current financial year. We normally do this presentation also every quarter. So we are going to basically take off from what he has said and share a few slides on how we see the 26-27 numbers look like in the light of all these revisions, and also the fourth quarter, given how the high frequency indicators have performed in the month of January, etc. So this slide, I don't need to repeat what Dr. Saurabh Garg showed. On the left side, 3 consecutive years of plus 7% GDP growth, which kind of also corroborates and vindicates our revision to the potential GDP of the economy to 7% or around that number. On the right side, what you see is the comparison of India's performance with several other economies. As we have been noticing in the post-COVID era, the sustained non-inflationary expansion of the Indian economy has held up not only in absolute terms, but also in relation to how others have been doing in the post-COVID era, where they are also struggling with the rising public debt and lower growth, etc. And in terms of the gross value addition growth rate, we are seeing, as again, this is a repetition of what Dr. Garg presented. We are showing most of these numbers on the left side in terms of growth rates and constant prices, and the share of GDP on the right side in current prices. So the growth rates of agriculture sector on the blue and the services in green color and the manufacturing, those numbers tell their own story. The manufacturing growth rate has been quite exemplary in the last 3 years, and the share of GDP broadly remaining the same, with agriculture going up slightly, and these are as in the current price series. Services sector is slightly down. And if you look at the growth rates of various expenditure components on the left side, private consumption, government, capital formation, exports and imports are shown on the left side. And in general, broadly speaking, by simply eyeballing these numbers, you can see the growth rates of investment have held up. These are basically, let's remember that the FY26 numbers are second advanced estimate. We still don't have the full year's numbers. So based on this, what we are seeing is that overall the private consumption growth rate is quite resilient. Rural consumption has been quite strong. Urban consumption is recovering on the back of the direct and indirect tax relief provided in the course of calendar year 2026, and so on. On the right side, as a share of current prices, private consumption has come down slightly, but in its place, investment ratio has picked up as well, quite well. And then if you look at specifically breaking down the granular data that MoSPI provides up to 24-25 now, in terms of how capital formation stacks up across various sectors, public, private, financial, non-financial, government, households and unincorporated enterprises. You see it in the tables for 24-25, the granular tables. So we are seeing that in 24-25, private non-financial corporations investment in machinery and equipment. We are segregating, there are three components that MoSPI gives, real estate, machinery and equipment, intellectual property products, etc. There are three subdivisions of the overall investment in GFCF, capital investment. We focus only on machinery and equipment. The interesting and the encouraging news is that unincorporated enterprises have maintained a growth rate of more than 10%, of course in current price terms, on investment in machinery and equipment. So I think that is a sign of dynamism in terms of the investment in, we don't have to only look at the incorporated sector for understanding the dynamism that we see in the overall economy. And again, this number is a repetition from Dr. Garg's presentation. First three quarters, the growth rates are 8.4 and 7.8, and it doesn't take much to back out what the fourth quarter GDP growth rate number should be in order to meet the 7.6% growth rate for the full year. On that basis, the expected or anticipated growth rate has to be 7.3% or more in Q4 to be able to achieve the full year real GDP growth rate of 7.6%. And I think the momentum in the economy is good enough to deliver us that 7.3% growth rate in the fourth quarter. And this is the, moving on from GDP to GVA, again as Dr. Garg pointed out, the manufacturing sector's growth rate is double digits. Services are not too far behind at 9.5%. This is GVA growth rate in real terms. And then if you look at the broad share of the economy, expenditure shares, they have remained broadly stable. And I have mentioned it even during the economic survey presentation that to be able to maintain a 30% plus gross fixed capital formation at the aggregate level in the economy in the current global context is a very respectable and creditable achievement on the part of the Indian economy given global excess capacity and uncertainty, etc. And in the high frequency indicators, which will give us some clue about how the fourth quarter stacks up. So if you look at the data, most of the boxes are in either light green or strong green. E-way bill generation, the yearly growth rates are there in the on a quarterly basis, and then January 26 compared to the yearly growth rates pre-COVID and also in the FY 24-25 two financial years. So by and large, if you look at the E-way bill generation, it is on par with the growth rates of the pre-COVID era and also in the previous two financial years. Non-food bank credit same story. Electricity consumption picking up and petrol and diesel consumption again comparable with the previous two financial years as well. So overall, I think as we mentioned in these three bullet points, all these parameters are by and large confirming the ability of the economy to grow at a rate that will give us the overall 7.6% growth rate. Moving on to some other indicators, especially on the industry sector, whether it is the 8 core industry growth rates or the PMI values of manufacturing and services sector. Obviously, all of us know above 50 indicates expansion and below 50 indicates contraction in the sectors. Port traffic, air cargo, railway freight, up to third quarter is available, and hotel occupancy rates, etc. None of them are giving us concern that the economy may be about to slow down. That's not the case. They indicate continued steady momentum as well. And there is a healthy expansion we see for trade and logistics indicators with port traffic and air cargo continuing to register robust growth in January 26. And external front, merchandise exports was year-on-year growth rate in January was low, as was the case in Q3 as well, reflecting the United States trade-related uncertainties as well. Non-oil, non-gems and jewelry export growth in the merchandise category, again compared to the pre-COVID average and the previous 2 financial years, on the lower side from Q3 onwards and in January 26, which is why they are in yellow shaded boxes. Services maintaining very good growth rates, and in terms of construction and infrastructure, steel and cement production by and large are either light shaded green or strongly shaded. We are actually on good track. Again, no major concern about the construction and trade related activities. Now with the European Union Free Trade Agreement, although it takes time for it to be ratified and become effective, the framework agreement with the United States, etc., will help us see better growth in merchandise exports in the coming financial year 26-27. And in terms of consumption demand indicators, two-wheeler vehicle sales, year-on-year growth, this is at the wholesale level, not at the retail level. Three-wheeler sales as well, these are all growth rates, not absolute numbers, and in comparison to the previous years. And domestic tractor sales growth, they are absolutely mind-boggling growth rate numbers, attesting to the robustness of rural demand. But again, as I mentioned, urban demand is also on the mend as we speak. Urban demand, again, UPI transaction volume growth 27.7%. Domestic passenger vehicle sales, after a strong growth in Q3, continuing with 8% growth in January, the month of January as well, much better than the previous 2 financial years. And domestic air passenger growth after 2 tepid quarters picking up in January, as I mentioned. That's why I said urban consumption is on the mend. So overall, the outlook for the economy, it continues to maintain strong growth supported by broad-based activity. Favorable supply-side conditions, including robust Rabi sowing, comfortable food grain stocks, and easing global commodity prices are expected to keep inflation low and stable. So if you put the first 2 bullets together, we're talking about the post-COVID highlight of the Indian economy has been sustained non-inflationary or moderate inflation growth. That combination is expected to continue in 26-27 as well. Fiscal consolidation on track in the light of the 22-23 base year GDP revision, nominal GDP being lower by roughly by about 12 lakh crores or so. The estimated fiscal deficit for 25-26 will now be 4.5%, but other indicators such as primary deficit, revenue deficit, or effective capital expenditure or capital expenditure to GDP ratios, they all remain broadly unchanged. So in that sense, the GDP revisions do not alter the fiscal trajectory that the union government is on at this point. And improved policy certainty resulting from successful trade agreements, including the India-US framework deal and the India-US trade agreement, will support exports and also stabilize capital flows going forward, which at the gross level have actually been improving in terms of FDI numbers. And also if you take a look at the February numbers so far, or FPI flows, they appear to be reversing. And considering the issues that the stock market in the United States is now beginning to factor in terms of AI exposure, I think India, from what was seen as a handicap in 2025, the lack of an AI story in the Indian capital markets may actually turn out to be an advantage when it comes to 2026 in terms of capital flows. That is something to keep in mind. So, the economic survey had projected a real GDP growth range of 6.8 to 7.2% on January 29th. We were waiting for the benchmark revisions to come through, and subsequent to the economic survey and the budget presentation, we also have had the framework agreement with the United States arrived at, etc. And therefore, we are increasing our GDP growth outlook for FY27 from 6.8 to 7.2 previously to between 7 and 7.4% under the new series. We are actually, at the moment, we feel that the risk is on the upside in this range. That is, the economy is more likely to achieve a number closer to 7.4%, rather than 7%. Of course, global uncertainties are the downside risk factor to keep in mind. So that concludes my supplementary remarks to what Dr. Garg presented, and he will conclude this presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Now I request Dr. Garg to make final remarks.
I really don't have anything more to say apart from the fact that you want me to go there? No. Okay. Apart from the fact, just wanted to mention that this process has taken us about 2 years, and we had different expert committees, in fact 5 expert committees and nearly 50 odd experts from other ministries and from outside the government. So I just want to place on record our appreciation and thanks to all those who gave time for this revision of work, and which has been an extremely technical exercise. And the National Accounts Division within the Ministry of Statistics, led by our DG, Mr. Santoshi, Mr. Kundu, and 2 of them, DGs, Rajiv Kumar and Brijender are here, Shubhra and Rajesh, they must be there, there they are. And all the others, I just want to thank all of them, and just, if you can join me and in thanking the extreme work that put up by all these.
Thank you. Now floor is open for questions. I'll take number 2.
Sir, good evening, sir. Shishir from Hindu Business Line. Sir, my question to Dr. Nageswaram. Sir, you said that there will be increase of 20 basis point in the economic survey projection. Now, what could be the nominal growth rate for the 26-27? And do you see any change in the fiscal deficit target also, sir?
I can't comment on the fiscal deficit target. Right now, the target is 4.3% of GDP. On the overall, which one will be the driver of this? I think the broad pattern of growth has been, as we have seen, is being consistent across consumption, investment. I feel that from an expenditure perspective, both consumption and investment both will be important drivers. Because the trade agreements will take different points in time to become effective, it may probably the full year effect of the trade agreements may be seen in 27-28 data than in 26-27 data. So I expect the other 2 components to be big drivers.
142, Sapna ji.
Yeah. Hi, Sapna from CNBC-TV18. Question to the MoSPI Secretary first and then the CEA. I mean, you had probably indicated this previously as well, that do not expect a big change in the FY26 growth numbers from what MoSPI had put out earlier. So how do you read this 7.6% very briefly? And also to the CA that as of now, you have indicated that closer towards 7.4% in FY27. If you could explain the rationale for that. Thank you very much.
On the change in numbers, as I mentioned, we had discussions with the IMF also to get a sense of what happens across the world because base revisions are done by all countries. And we see that as the data systems become more mature, the fluctuations reduce because of every base revision. And I think that is what we are seeing in this base revision also, that it's in the previous base or the ones before, it is somewhere between 2 and 3%. So it remains in that overall as a base year. You are talking specifically of 7.6% for this year. That's based on the increased projections that we had for Q3, which we didn't have when we made the projection for 7.4. And also the other, I think, high frequency indicators which the CEA mentioned that have informed this projection.
So what made us raise the range by 20 basis points on either end? As I said, the framework agreement will remove uncertainties related to capital flows. Although the full year's impact on exports may be felt in 27-28, as I answered Shishir earlier, there will be some impact, positive impact in terms of capital formation, which in turn will also spill over into consumption, and that is a rationale.
67 in the central bank.
Hi, sir. Rishabh Bhatnagar with NDTV Profit. I wanted to understand, with more and more deflators coming in and being adopted, do you also expect the IMF to upgrade India's data quality assessment framework now?
So the IMF does a data assessment regularly under the Article 4 discussions. So there are 3 or 4 major areas of concern which had been highlighted, and I think those concerns have more than well been handled. So I suppose the final assessment is up to them, but on our part we are confident of the data changes that we've done.
76 behind this.
Hello sir, this is Suchandrima. I'm from INS. My question is on these databases, how policy reforms helping improving India's GDP. If we can mention about the GST data or per capita income, are we on the path to become the 3rd largest economy? Can we say that?
So I think what we are doing is we are ensuring that the data capture is so much more accurate, and that the picture of the economy which the GDP presents is a much more robust and accurate picture. Where these numbers will actually lead, that's the numbers themselves will say. I don't have any comment on that.
26. Sorry.
Yes, we are on course to becoming the top 3 or the top 4 largest economies in the world. There is no doubt about that. It will happen in the course of the next few years. Our growth rate post-COVID has been probably one of the best, if not the best in the world, especially among G20 economies. But naturally, whether a particular relative position is reached or not will also depend on many other factors, like the exchange rate, which in India's case did not go in our favor in 25-26. That will naturally have an impact. So the timing, given global uncertainties, given what happens to exchange rates and the growth rates in other countries, could be variable. The timeline could be varied depending on these parameters. But to be able to, as I mentioned, what we need to focus on is on aspects in our control. Both the policy and the reform direction are both paving the way for sustained non-inflationary growth of at least 7% in real terms and 10 to 11% in nominal terms in India. And because of uncertainties related to capital flows, etc., the exchange rate had an adverse, had a depreciating year in calendar year 2025. With these agreements, trade agreements, and as I mentioned in my remarks towards the end, with the concern that are now emanating related to the current state of the AI ecosystem in India, what was once considered a drawback in 2025 could actually turn out to be India's strength from a second mover advantage perspective. So all those things will improve capital flows, stabilize the exchange rate, etc., which will then mean that the dollar value of the Indian GDP will reflect better the true underlying performance of the Indian economy in rupee terms in the years to come.
26.
Sir, this is Deepak Mandal from New Indian Express. Sir, given the fact that the FY 25-26 numbers have been revised, nominal GDP growth rate has been revised, will we become a 4 trillion economy at the end of this year, or the 4th largest economy as we were all expecting?
In FY 26-27, I think based on current indications, our projection is for nominal GDP to be around close to about 11%. Now that we have revised the real GDP projection as well, it will cross the 4 trillion mark comfortably in 26-27. Now, as I responded to an earlier question, the relative ranking will also depend on other countries' growth rates and exchange rates as well. So there we cannot comment on it.
249. 249.
So it was an export. It's answered.
It has been done? Okay. 234.
Hi, so Siddharth from the Indian Express. one of the biggest revisions that you've seen in terms of the sector in the old data is trade, repair, hotels and restaurants. I think the size is down by a quarter now. Is it purely due to change in deflator methods, or is there something else also here?
One of the main reasons is the fact that that we now have detailed surveys available, the ASUS and the PLFS, and given that large proportions of this sector may be part of the informal sector, so given the better data sources we have, it's a much more robust estimate that we've been able to produce.
24.
सर आलोक फ्रॉम CNBC आवाज। सर मेरा सवाल यही कि जिस तरह से इकोनॉमिक सर्वे के डेटा से 20 बेसिस पॉइंट का रिवाइज किया है सर ने, तो इस तरह से जो हम लोग उम्मीद कर रहे थे कि दिसंबर तक दुनिया की तीसरी बड़ी इकोनॉमी भारत बन जाएगा, क्या हम और जल्दी बन सकते हैं? क्या इसके पीछे रीजन, जैसे आपने बताया कि एक्सचेंज रेट और दूसरे देशों की भी इकोनॉमी, थोड़ा सा इसको समझाएं सर।
I think I responded to this question earlier as to why we increase these numbers by 20 basis points, because of lower uncertainties related to capital flows and partially due to expected improved export performance, which in fact will be more visible hopefully in 27-28. So these are the reasons why we revised the range from 6.8 to 7.2 to a new range of 7 to 7.4 in real terms.
45. Manoj.
Thank you, sir. Sir, my question to Secretary.
Please introduce yourself, Manoj.
Manoj Kumar from Reuters, sir. My question to Secretary and CA, sir. Sir, now we have a new base year for inflation and GDP, and we have the data like for last few years. So, do you think that with the food inflation weight coming down in the new series, so is it time to have a new target for inflation from 2 to 6%? Does it need revision? One. And secondly, sir, my question is like this estimates on this per capita estimates that we have given like for 24, 25. So it shows like nearly over 9% growth in nominal terms in per capita for 24, 25. So how, looking at the number, like, so from the first advanced estimates, the population for 25, 26 was like estimated at nearly 142 crore versus 140 crore in the previous year. So how do we see per capita growth, per capita income growth, sir? How we see that, like, so how would you see that debate going on, particularly, and as you mentioned about the dollar, in dollar terms, it seems that our per capita income still remains around less than $2,200 in 24, 25. Thank you.
On the inflation target, I think there's a separate institution that handles it, so it's not prudent for us to comment on that. But all I can say is that we have a much more up-to-date CPI, which reflects the consumption patterns of the people presently. So you have a robust, much more robust estimate to base it on. On the second issue, I'll just mention on the population figures, and the CA can take up the other part. The population figures, we use an updated figure based on Health Ministry's projections, and given the fact that now registration of births and deaths is near universal, the estimates are very, very robust. So the per capita GDP or per capita income numbers are as robust as the GDP itself. I'll stop here.
So on the inflation targeting, again, as Dr. Garg pointed out, the RBI is in the process of concluding its consultations with stakeholders. So far, the last 10 years, the 4% plus or minus 2 has served India well. We have come down to a moderate inflation levels these days. So whether the current framework stands or not will be revealed at the end of the consultation process of the Reserve Bank, which is happening right now, and the Ministry of Finance and RBI will be announcing it sometime in the course of this year. We don't need to second guess it or prejudge it right now. Now, per capita nominal GDP growth, if the population growth rate has slowed in the country and we are growing around 10 to 11%. So in the last few years, this is real or nominal or real? In real terms, the per capita income has grown roughly around 6.3 to 6.4% on average in the last three financial years, in real terms. In nominal terms, obviously, the growth rate will be about 3 percentage point higher. So therefore, to be able to grow at 9% in per capita term in terms of current prices is very realistic.
And the final question is number 4.
Thank you. I'm Anil Honda. With the stream, the way you have put up the figures, I assume that we are going to reach there. But 2-3 areas which I have marked, I would like to submit them. PLI is a scheme, FTAs, and the period of the COVID-19 2021 are the areas where the picture is not very clear. So I would like to understand how these have been considered. And FTAs also of late have been under scanner. So how do you look at them and how have you projected them? I have a few more submissions if you like to take it.
Question is though.
My question is the way this data has been accumulated and the working has been probably for 10 years. So in between there is a period of COVID-19 2021, yeah? And in the present, there is a PLI scheme which the government is running. There are FTAs which are happening, and there is a parallel economy which would be changing from time to time. So if you have not considered or considered these things.
First of all, for the back years, the FAQ document that MoSPI has put out is clearly given a timeline as to when they will be releasing the historic time series, which will cover the COVID years and even further beyond that, all the way back to 1951. So during that disclosure, which will come sometime towards the final quarter of the calendar year, then you will be able to see how the COVID years have been reflected in the new series. The various PLI schemes are obviously reflected in the way the manufacturing numbers are revised higher, etc. in the series. And the free trade agreements we have done so far with UK, which is yet to be ratified and made effective. Same is the case with the European Union, and the United States Framework Agreement will happen hopefully before mid-March as indicated. So all these bigger trade agreements with bigger geographical zones are their effect still lies in the future. And therefore, as I said, the full effect of all of those trade agreements, that's why I repeated in several responses that they will be reflected in 27-28 data.
Thank you everybody. Thanks a lot. Thank
you. The estimates that we make. On the methodology part, I'll just focus on 2 aspects. One is on the use of double deflation. This has been a major issue which has been raised over in various discussions and critiques which have been published. We are doing away with single deflation across all sectors. Double deflation would be there fully in the agriculture and manufacturing sector. In agriculture sector, it already was. In manufacturing, we are introducing it. Given the granularity of information that is needed and the data that is needed. And double deflation means that we are deflating the input side and the output side with separate deflators based on the products that are actually being used on the input side and the output side. We could not do double deflation earlier because that granularity of data was not there. If I can also mention that in the earlier series, we were using around 180 deflators. Now we're going to be using somewhere around 600 odd deflators, which reflects the granular deflations, and there are a mix of both CPI and WPI. Let me again reiterate, we don't use headline numbers in any case anyway. The second issue which had been raised periodically is the discrepancy which was there between the production side estimates and the expenditure or the consumption side estimates. In the new series, we will be publishing supply use tables regularly, which will ensure that the discrepancies are eliminated. It's not only just reduced, they are eliminated because there will be clear supply use tables going ahead. Coming to the numbers, you would have seen now I'm talking of the base, that is at 22-23, the year 22-23. What are the major changes? At the overall level, as per the revision of numbers, the 11-12 base had the GDP of 22-23 at 268.9 lakh crores. In the new base, there's a reduction of about 2.9% at 261.2 lakh crores.